totally natural thing, and it's like very, very healthy. And it's beautiful. Like you're out there looking at the mountains all around and nature, little Tweety birds flying by while you're bathing. You're not sealed off in some little fiberglass cubicle.
G'day and welcome. This is the Hunting Republic podcast. The podcast where we discuss all things hunting and outdoors. So if you love hunting, camping, fishing, hiking, bushwalking, full driving, or just being in the outdoors, then we reckon you've come to the right place. My name is Luke. I will be your host, and I can't wait to have you along for the journey. So please enjoy this edition of the Hunting Republic podcast. G'day team, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Hunting Connection podcast. I'd like to kick off today's episode by saying how much of a thrill it was to be able to sit down and have a good yarn with a really good mate of mine, but a mate of mine who I met a number of years ago now. And we'll go into the backstory in the episode, but Rog and I have been good mates ever since we got dragged halfway around the world by our respective partners, and we happened to have a fortuitous meeting in a little town in Switzerland where we both lived for several years. And when you're living halfway around the world and you're away from family and close friends and stuff, it is really cool to be able to bump into a guy and strike up a friendship, and definitely what we Aussies would call a mateship, sharing passions that are the same. And it was really a privilege to be able to sit down and have Roger on the podcast, but also over the period of time that we were there, to be able to actually catch up and talk and share in some good, not only good memories, but making some more. And our kids got to meet each other too for the very first time. So I hope you enjoy this episode of the Hunting Republic podcast, brought to you from Colorado in the United States. And as a quick aside, it goes a bit of a way to explaining the absence in the appearance of episodes in the last month or so, since my family and I have been travelling for 44 days now, give or take, and a little bit hard to record podcasts when you're travelling. But this was a special podcast, and I hope you really enjoy an insight into Roger's hunting, passion for hunting, and some of the similarities and differences with regards to the way things work, but also the exact similarities in the passions that we have for what it is that we do. Please enjoy this episode, this 5th episode of the Hunting Republic podcast. So, welcome to the podcast, Rog.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming halfway around the world to get me on here. It's awesome.
That's awesome. We'll just have a quick chat in Roger's basement in Colorado, and short backstory, I suppose. I've known Roger for since 2010, mid 2010 we first met, and Roger and I were both the term they used was trailing spouses, and we both ended up in a little town in Switzerland called Zug, and both our wives worked at the same school, and we were the trailing spouses, and we got together. I can't even remember where we met. Was it at Pickwick's that night, the first night?
One of those nights, and we were both doing photography.
Yeah, we got
Just
talking, and
just as a passion
Yeah.
of photographing, right, the Alps and Switzerland, and it's such a great vista. And then we took school photos, didn't we?
we did. We did. 2 years.
We did a lot of little odd
Yeah.
tasks to keep us busy and
School
occupied.
photos, and when they had made me, I went up and did relief teaching at the school. When the principal conned me into it, Amy guilted me into it. But yeah, bumped into this crazy bloke with this American accent from Colorado, and one of the places I've always wanted to visit. And he tells me he's into photography and he's a bow hunter. And I was like, what the hell?
13 years later, we make it happen in the States.
Here I am, and
1 week after rifle season.
exactly 1 week after Rogers spent a few days in the mountain trying to get himself an elk. And unfortunately, it wasn't to be.
It was not to be. This year, so in Colorado, we have, for rifle at least, there's 4 seasons: first, second, third, fourth. They're typically a week long, and they're separated by a week, so give the animals time to recalibrate in a sense. And I had a tag, a license for either sex, bull or cow, elk, right in my backyard here. It's about a 70-kilometer stretch by 30 or 40 kilometers, a kind of a block that's part of the Roaring Fork River watershed. Beautiful area.
Stunning.
I always love to like to think that I can hunt in my backyard. I can source meat in the backyard. So while there aren't as many elk there, there's something about it that draws me to want to connect with an animal, connect with the woods in my back door versus driving 2 or 3 hours where there might be more elk.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got out for the first morning. It was I was up. I went to the secret spot, supposedly secret spot,
The honey hole.
where there's federal land surrounded by private land, and I had an access in there. Supposedly it was secret, but 8 cars, 8 rigs were at the parking lot at 5 a.m., and sunrise was about 7 a.m., so I was a little bit disturbed. But I thought I found a way, and with my headlamp coming in at 5 in the pitch dark, with the constellations and the stars out, it was a new moon.
Beautiful.
I stepped on about 5 or 6 cows and kind of spooked them off. So even before I got started, but it was nice to see and smell animals and see those big eyes glowing in my headlamp.
Absolutely.
So I got out. The second day I was ready to go back out, and my wife told me I was taking our son to a swim meet up in Aspen. So I need to do a better job communicating to my wife what a 5-day season means, and how on the second day, if I'm going to a swim meet, it's really hard to connect with an animal.
To put meat in that freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something else, sitting here in the middle of what is elk country and driving around your hometown and seeing elk antlers just up on someone's wall or fence or, that sort of thing. For an Aussie who, we have our 6 species of deer and stuff, but there's a lot of people down under who have elk at the top of their list, and it's a really cool place to be, to look in the hills and think, they're up there somewhere, just there.
It is.
It's a surreal experience for me, let alone to get up and hunt them,
And the valley, this valley is it's prime elk territory. We're at an elevation of 5,700 feet right now, so 2,700 meters.
High enough that I feel it.
High enough that we feel it. It goes up to about 2,700 meters up by Aspen, and we have 6,000 meter peaks all around. And it's a beautiful area. It's elk country, and before the resorts, before a lot of the home developments and the subdivisions that are going in, even though the valley only has 50,000 residents in it, over 3 or 4 towns, there's a lot of development that has bisected a lot of that elk migration.
Yep.
So they're in the mountains. They can't always cross the highways. We build these huge fences so we don't hit them on the roads. But sometimes they want to go to that water source. They want to go to the river. and they can't. And so we've done a good job of basically kind of screwing up their habitat a bit. But they're still in the mountains, and it's such big country that you know they're smart creatures.
Absolutely.
On the first shot, they know exactly where the private land fence is. They know where to go. They know how to blend in. They know how to be loud and to be quiet, and they know how to be seen and then just blend in. And so they provide a good hunt. It's not just going out there and gathering, as people used
No,
to say. It's
absolutely
a hunt.
not.
You know, you got to earn it. You're not just going to be able to walk a kilometer from your car and just happen into a field with a ton of elk.
Actually, that brings to mind a meme that I posted today on the podcast website. And do I have to look it up on? Yes, I do. I deleted it off my phone, but I'll just drop into Instagram and find it. And it was exactly that topic. And the meme says, here we go. If you consider an unsuccessful hunt to be a waste of time, then the true meaning of the chase eludes you altogether.
Totally.
By Fred Bear. Who else?
Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly it. So how did you get into hunting? Have you been hunting your whole life? Is it a generational thing for you?
It
or?
wasn't. I had some uncles and some folks that did some hunting way back, but I was really never exposed to it. My first real hunt was with my college buddy, Mike, up in Montana. I went to school in Missoula at the University of Montana, and Mike was from eastern Montana. Grew up in a lot of little towns. His mom was with one of the churches, and he knew that country like the back of his hand. And we were, 20 years old, and taking his old beat down Toyota Tercel into these wild mountain ranges, and we went for deer first. So, and it's mule deer on the east side of Montana. There's whitetail and mule deer in Montana. But where we were going was kind of out in the bluffs, some timber, a lot of open plains, a lot of call them the breaks, and a lot of interesting topography. And where the mule deer really shine, there's a lot of alfalfa, a lot of big ranches, a lot of sage, and so it's prime mule deer habitat. And he's like, we're gonna go hunting, and it's gonna be great. And I borrowed his 308, I believe. And we had 2 rifles. We found deer really quick. We put down a nice 4x4, and we brought it into slaughter. And it was like the beginning of this beautiful thing. And at the time, Mike had a longbow that was made by a local boyer somewhere in Montana. And he's like, we should go down to the shooting range, which is just a log cabin in the middle of nowhere, where somebody had a few shooting lanes and $20 bills on the wall and some targets. And a crusty old owner who has big beard and kind of a leprechaun hat, and is my new best friend because he thinks he's going to make a sale. And within a month, I bought this beautiful recurve, Great Plains brand recurve, made somewhere in Kansas by a master crafter, we'll say. And it was a little bit too heavy for me, but I loved it. It was the most beautiful bow. I loved the idea of shooting instinctively with a recurve. And it's easy to fall in love with the notion, and then you go out there and you have to practice every morning, and you're like, well, geez, this is going to take over my life in a sense.
Not
and
quite
I think
as-
that
yeah.
first summer I was shooting every day.
Yep.
Had a 3D target and loved it. And I never really had a good coach, so my range was never really there. But that first fall we went out hunting, shot a lot of grouse and rabbits and other things.
Nice.
Never shot a large animal with it. It was just always out of my range, or it's hunting. There's always
It's
a
bow
reason why.
hunting.
But I loved it. And we did that for, 2 or 3 years. We would be all over western Montana, eastern Montana. There were river trip. There were public lands where you could only access through the river. So we'd take my canoe, take our bows, half rack of beer, sleeping bags, and we'd paddle 5 miles down this beautiful river, the Bitterroot River, and we would find some public lands that were accessible, and we'd hunt. And there's deer everywhere, and we'd always be like, "Well, I was going to push him this way. Why did you drive him this way?" and whatever. And we never really connected with archery. And we did with rifles. It was fun, but he was my tour guide in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
It was at a time when there was enough internet access and magazines to figure out the whole world of hunting, from the organizations to the NRA and some of these larger groups that you kind of found where your niche is. And I suspect it's the same as Australia, that hunters at the end of the day are still taking home animals. Within that space, there's a lot of different ethics, a lot of different beliefs, a lot of different strategies and approaches to hunting. And so I kind of found my niche. I found my tribe, in a sense, of people that I connected with that maybe had similar thoughts on what fair chase is, and what are the romantic ways, those romantic notions of getting animals versus maybe those other mechanisms that are maybe a little more painless for those animals, right? So less suffering, etc. But it's been a part of me since then for 30 years now. And I don't get out every season. Sometimes in March, when we have to put in for our licenses for the following fall, I forget. And so I kind of go tagless, and I have to compete with people over the counter for certain tags and licenses. But it's a beautiful thing. It's something I want to introduce to my son when he's ready. And I might take him out in a couple of weeks here for deer. I have a doe tag. And we'll see if he's ready. He won't pull the trigger. It's a rifle tag. But to have him out there, I joke with Rachel, I might have a vegetarian on Sunday morning. But, at least to me, he's at that age where if he's eating meat, to be able to understand what it takes to take a life.
Absolutely.
To have a communion, to have an exchange, a blessing, some kind of transaction that is holier than anything, right? And to be able to witness that, and to have that knowledge, and to have that experience in it. And we can only, sometimes we think our kids might be ready and sometimes maybe it's not, and so maybe it won't work out, but I'll let you know. But for now, there's this idea that, at least for the first morning for where we're going to be going, I would love for him to join me. He's fidgety, so how long is that going to last in the dark, right? But to have that experience,
Absolutely.
to have him look through some binoculars, to have him see sunrise, to have him looking at dark, shadowy shapes and have those come to life, whether they're bushes or deer, to see the world wake up.
Absolutely. The wild world too.
So getting back to the quote you had earlier, I mean, it's always, whether it's hunting or fishing or climbing or hiking, it's connecting with nature. And like most people, I'm sure the best days hunting, you never saw an animal or got close to one, but it was being outside.
Absolutely.
Right?
And the cool thing about what you're saying is, having met your son and spent a few days with him now, and sort of gotten a bit of a gist as to the way he thinks. I think the process of the hunt will be something that he'll click with. He seems to be a young guy who does the processes.
Yeah.
And I think the introduction to those processes will probably really, I think he'll really tune into it well, and he'll enjoy that side of it.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I mean, ultimately, it's as we think about our kids, and maybe it's not fragile. It's more that he's a sensitive kid, and at some point, you're looking at an animal, you're looking at those doe eyes, literally, and they're not moving. And it's the start of something of the exchange of that life, for that nourishment.
Absolutely.
And for an appreciation for that. And I want to take them through a prayer. I want to take them through that moment that makes us human, that makes us animals, and see how they do. and see if that is anything that is something that might resonate with him. And if he doesn't ever want to do it again, but he orders a burger after school with his friends, it's the same thing.
He'll still understand.
It's still a life for a life in a sense. So,
And
yeah.
So I've repeated the quote several times on this podcast, I believe, but also on a few others I've been in the last couple of months. That I was first pointed to by a Spanish guy that I know, Pedro Ampuro, who I was just looking at some of his stuff on socials today. But it was, a hunter is not without remorse. And, and that remorse and that feeling, that exposure to either, doesn't matter if it's a grown adult or it's a child or a kid who's of, age that, his parents deem him mature enough to go and be exposed to that. It is that process that I think is what is the grounding part of the whole thing. There's the awe and the wonder, and as you said before, the connection with the land and the changing of those shadows into reality as light comes and all that sort of stuff. But the grounding is that reality and that remorse.
Yep.
And that is that connection with the human side of it, or the humane side of it.
I mean, some might write it off, and others it could be just a profound awakening. It's a responsibility. You're taking a life, and it's at least for me, it's a serious event, a serious kind of choice that I'm making. And so I want to kind of, as a dad, we get to be the tour guide sometimes and talk to them about perhaps what's important in life, what's sacred in life, and what is something that drives us.
Yep.
And so great, I can choose to make that what it is, and I'm excited to share that with him. And if he's not ready this year, great, maybe it's another year. But as a dad who hunts, who has other means of putting meat on the table, I'm not going to starve like a lot of modern hunters. But it is about fair chase. It is about getting out there. And if I can share that with him, I can't think of a stronger way to connect with a human being other than hunting. I used to climb a lot in the mountains, and your climbing partners have your life in their hands, literally. And sometimes you go through lightning, you go through circumstances where you might be like, hey, it's me and you, buddy, smoke them if you got them, because we're going down.
Exactly.
And climbing partners to me were always it wasn't just a run of the mill, hey, I like you, let's do this. But hunting partners, like, that's one of the most, I think, partnerships, bonds, that to me, like, I don't bring just anybody hunting.
100%.
Right? And those experiences that you have, and that's why my friend Mike up there, we haven't seen each other in a while, but like, can pick up the phone at any point, and we can be in lockstep in terms of just, I don't know.
Absolutely.
We have shared experiences that I will never give up. I'll remember forever. So. The good, the bad, the crazy times, the fun times, the silly times, the like, what the hell were we thinking times, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And God bless them. So.
Yeah. No, and I don't know, we talked about the first episode that I did of this podcast with Barry and Dave, and
right.
And if anybody else who's listening has heard those episodes, the same thing with Baz, like, we've known the guy 30 years, and introduced him to hunting as well, took him on his first hunt and drove 17 hours to get to the hunting property, and within the first morning he had his first kill, and that was something else. And it's that same connection. I could an occasion pick up the phone and, like, what the hell's going on, and nothing changes, and it's the same, and
no,
and it's,
but you have that
connection,
never,
and that distinct, it's fantastic. So like you talked about hunting the deer. What's the difference between the seasons with the deer and the elk?
So in the States, unlike where you are with, it's kind of a flip. It's all public lands that we get to hunt. You can hunt private lands if you have permission, but that's a little bit harder in the West, especially with a lot of new homeowners that come out and want to lock the gate and not allow any public access. But deer and elk, depends on the state, but a lot of deer and elk seasons overlap. So that for first rifle, you can have an elk tag, a deer tag, doe or buck, cow or bull, and they're regulated. In Colorado, we only have mule deer in the mountains, and their populations are recovering, but the state Department of Wildlife, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they issue far more elk tags than deer tags.
Really?
There's just more elk than deer here.
Yeah, wow.
You see deer everywhere, but mule deer are one of those species, and I'm not a wildlife biologist. I don't play one on TV, but from what I heard is, they thrive until they don't, and so their herds can have somewhat precipitous declines fairly quickly, and so even though we see deer on the side of the road, they can be in more domestic and suburban areas. There's still the numbers aren't that high where they offer a ton of deer tags, so they're kind of harder to get.
Okay.
Every time I'm elk hunting, I see deer. Every time I'm deer hunting, I see elk. That's the way it goes. And I haven't put in for.
How does that work? You don't hunt with me.
Yeah. The cool thing about this area is we have a lot of wilderness areas, and there's one up by Aspen called the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness, and they have a high season buck tag that they offer. It's a rifle tag in the middle of archery season, but it's way up there at 13,000 feet and 14,000 feet. And so you're on these ridges, you're busting your lungs, and it's a week-long buck tag for a muley buck, while I think it's like September 7th to the 14th. So it's right smack in the middle of archery season. So our archery season goes for the month of September. We have muzzle loader in between, and then rifle season for elk and deer starts in mid-October.
Yep.
And so, with the elk, you get to hunt the rut, archery. Nothing like it, right? To I don't know what it's like down there for your species, but to have. That's what got me. It was the archery. It was just to get close to the animals.
Yep.
And it's funny, after you do archery and you get your rifle tag, there's a bull at 100 yards. You're like, oh, it's too far. 100 meters, it's too far out. I got to get closer. And you're like, wait a second. I
don't have to.
I zeroed in at 200 meters, right?
I don't have to. That's right.
So,
That's right.
but it's for archery for me, it was we called in a raghorn one morning. A little, I don't know how big it was, but it was a bull. He came running in. I was cow calling. My partner Mike was bugling, and this thing was 7 yards away from me.
Wow.
And he was young. He was full of it. He wanted to fight. He wanted to kick ass. And that was my first experience of like,
Holy shit.
Wow. Now I get it. Now I get why people are just, they can't even pull back because they're just like, they're shaking and they're having the time of their lives.
Absolutely.
So, deer hunting is different. I'm a total non sequitur. I'm weaving here.
It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter,
for
mate.
deer, it's the same. It's the same seasons. And the state offers a lot of elk tags. And what's interesting about state wildlife agencies is that most of their budget, at least in Colorado, comes from selling tags for deer and elk.
Yep.
So they're state funded, but they don't get much money from the state. So their revenue source is selling tags. Colorado is pretty liberal with the amount of tags they sell, i.e. they sell a ton of tags. And most of those go out of state. If you're out of state, you're gonna pay $600, $700 for an elk tag for a 1 week hunt, and there are plenty of people lined up to do that.
And look, just quickly, based on some of the prices that you'll pay for, I mean, this comparison to guided hunts, but you can still pay access fees down in Australia that don't get you any guiding.
Right.
$600 is nothing.
Well, I'm sure.
For what we pay at home.
Yeah, so that's your license, and then of course, if you want to do it yourself, great. You can bring your side by side and your beef jerky and your coolers and your Jeeps and everything else, and you spend a lot like any hobby, right? Man, hunters have found a way to get rid of their disposable income, or the industry has found a good way to sell you their Kool-Aid and sell you the stuff that it's not going to make you a better hunter, but maybe it just makes the experience overall. It's great.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they sell a lot of tags, and that gives them the revenue then to have agents and rangers that will come out and ensure that people are doing what they need to do.
Yep.
That they're legal. But there's always this push and pull because I think the number one issue with elk and deer mortality is still lead poisoning, right? I mean, it's still at the end of the day, but
100%.
yet I work for the Forest Service, and so I also know that, and that's the federal agency that manages a lot of habitat. We don't manage the wildlife, but we manage the landscape and the things that those deer eat, and so it's a fascinating balance to have with these agencies that are in charge of preserving populations. Sometimes they'll get mad at us for maybe like doing some logging and ruining some habitat. And then they also, on the other hand, issue a ton of tags that take out half the elk population, right? So it's this push and pull, and it's an interesting, I think, environment. Yeah.
It's a really interesting conversation because there's a lot of pressure at home in Australia with regards to the species that we hunt, and as discussions we've had, you know that anything that we can hunt is feral and introduced.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between an introduced species, a pest and a declared pest, and what that means with regards to management and eradication or efforts towards that, and responsibilities of landowners and that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of conversations being had at the moment, and white papers being issued and all that sort of stuff with regards to deer, because deer populations of the various species up and down the coast and all over the place are exploding.
Right.
We've had several years of extremely good conditions, and all species are exploding, but deer seem to be much more visible, particularly in the suburbs. And the areas where there's a high population, therefore more eyes get on them than say pigs, which arguably or not, some might agree or disagree. In my opinion, actually do far greater damage to our ecosystems than deer do. But they don't get seen in the suburbs, so they're not as topical amongst the the greater population. Yeah. But those discussions around, from a hunting perspective, that deer are being, or people are pushing to class them as declared pests, and therefore, in certain places where there's chopper shoots, chopper culls, where they just come in and wipe out whatever they can, or at least shoot them, wipe them out. Who knows? They don't actually stop to check. Yeah. And there's a lot of very heated debate and heated discussion from those of us who think the species, or whatever the feral is, deserves better than some of the management practices. And then, that whole notion of, observing a lot of the framework and the way that the tag systems work here, and the way that you guys have structured things to be such that you put a price on an animal's head and it becomes valuable, and then it becomes valuable to the landholder. And in the state of Queensland where I live, as you said before, we don't have public land hunting. We only have private land hunting. So therefore, if there's a price on that animal's head and it becomes worth something to the landowner, then they need to manage that herd. Mm-hmm. They don't want it to overrun their property. That's not in their interest. But at the same time, there can be a financial benefit for them to have those animals, and therefore there's a sustainability in managing those animals rather than just wiping them all out.
Oh yeah, there's some private ranches here in the West too that charge a pretty good access fee, and they really cull the herd for those really big trophy bulls, that people really want. Because there's, in America, there's the entire spectrum, right, of horn hunters, the trophy hunters versus the meat hunters. I'm probably more in the latter category. I've got random sheds here and there around, that the dogs chew on that the girls were just playing with the
Yeah.
pumpkins. But I'm not one to necessarily to go for the horns.
Mm-hmm.
I like to eat my meat with a spoon, right? So cows and does are they sure do taste great.
That's it. And like we've had the discussion, and your wife has certainly mentioned that she definitely likes elk. Do you prefer elk to deer?
I do.
And why was that? What's the difference?
I think it's just honestly, it's more of the, regardless of the species, it's more, in my view, of what they're eating.
Yep.
So if you're in eastern Montana and these mule deer are eating sage, it's going to be a little gamier, a little more of that. It's love-hate. It's what you like, right? But elk is a little bit more mild, but it still has, it's the perfect balance of a red meat that's not too gamey, but it's got just a perfect flavor profile. So I love it. A lot of red-blooded Americans do. It's not a bad thing. I think I've had moose once.
Yep.
People say it's very similar. Deer, it really depends what they're eating.
Yep.
If they're eating acorns and if they're eating alfalfa, and eating, poaching a lot of their diet from private farms, they're going to taste a lot better than those that have been eating sage and some of those more wild grasses that they can find.
And any particular cut of the elk that you prefer?
I mean, it's hard not to like the tenderloin and the backstrap because there's so much of it. It's usually delicate. The last cow I had was just... Actually, the last cow 2 years ago, I was helping a buddy out who's also wearing bracken wear. It's amazing. We got a cow just 20 clicks away from here, and we hauled it out, and I think I got one of the front legs and some backstrap and some other things, random cuts that he shared with me. And even the front leg, they're not sexy cuts, right? Off the rear leg, you get some larger cuts that are that make some great steaks. But the stuff that we had off the front shoulder was just beautiful, beautiful meat. I'm still a believer that the way you treat that animal from the time you pull the trigger, if you've been chasing it, if it's been running, how you cure it, how you hang it, how you take care of it, if you're dragging it through the woods and bruising it up,
Absolutely.
and how you cut it and how you store it, I still think does so much. It's respect for the animal, right? You want to treat it well, but then it impacts the taste. And I like to cook. I'm not a chef.
You may as well be.
I've loved to cook for a long time, and the first deer we got in Montana, we brought it to a butcher, and they give you the menu, and you make some of it into sausage and hamburger, and you get your steaks back, and you don't even know if it's...
Love it.
You don't even know if it's yours.
Could be.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. And the burger was thrown into a pile with everyone else's deer.
Yep.
And, I didn't know any better. Second deer, brought back to our garage, and I butchered it myself. And I was a biology major in college, did a lot of dissections, and loved the process of butchering, to isolate muscles, to understand how strong a deer's back leg or an elk's back leg is by deconstructing that leg.
Absolutely.
And taking the eye round versus the bottom round, and taking like these meat cuts that you've always heard of and applying them to actual muscle groups.
Yep.
And it was such a fascinating thing. And I made my own stock that time out of, I roasted those bones, and I did a mirepoix, and I did these amazing things.
So you just said a word I don't even know. And
yeah,
you reckon you're not a chef?
Celery, onion, carrot. It's a French concoction.
I'm going to throw a French word out there too. Sound important.
Yeah, and so it was the best stock I've ever made in my life.
Wow.
I've made grouse stock and pheasant stock since, and still it stands out as like the best stock I ever made. And it was probably the most fun thing I could do. And since then, I've always butchered my own. I feel like if you're going to shoot an animal, at least for me, you take it full circle, and you butcher it yourself, and you get to kind of, you don't just give it to somebody else to say, hey, deal with this for me. And I've had the time, and I love doing it, and I make the time. So
it's funny you talk about the interesting, or the interest in the fascination with the anatomy. I found that too. My first ever bow kill was just a rabbit out in Gundawindi, which is southwest of Queensland, very flat area. And the homestead we were staying at, these rabbits were just running.
Was that kind of getting deserty at that point, or no?
Oh, not really.
Not like Adelaide deserty. Okay.
No, not quite.
But it's rabbit brush.
Sheep country, a lot of rabbits there because it's right near the border, and New South Wales has heaps of them, and it's you'll find a lot more there than you will further north because of the conditions and the climate and the heat and stuff like that. But so I whacked one and skinned it. I tanned the skin. I've still got it.
Nice.
But the process of skinning it and actually revealing the anatomy underneath, and you could see all those muscles, and you actually look at this thing and you go, I can see why you are such quick little pricks across the ground. You see where the ligaments attach and how the muscles work.
Oxygen, the pathway. It's so red.
It's fascinating, yeah.
It's so, the reddest meat.
It's just for pure speed.
And it looks like a different beast because anytime you skin an animal, but rabbits especially. I shot a great rabbit with my recurve once, and it was a perfect shot, piercing scream. But I got it out, and I skinned it a certain way, kind of pulled it apart from the middle.
Yep.
And you look at this thing, and it looks like a greyhound underneath.
Yeah, it does. 100%. It really does.
Lean, fast, running machine.
And then you have you have jackrabbits over here too, I believe, which are big, aren't they?
They are.
Big? Yeah. So we have hares, the European hares, and they're the same. They're much bigger than sort of the rabbit. And you skin one of them too, and even more so because it's bigger. And their gait is a bit different to a rabbit, but they're quick. They're really quick.
They're quick, and when you skin a jackrabbit, it's an eerie body, I found. And I've never shot kangaroos or anything like that, but it had rabbit. When you skin it, it still looks like a rabbit. And when I skinned a jackrabbit once, and I made a Hassenpfeffer out of it, but when I took it apart, there was something that was just something eerie about it. The musculoskeletal system and everything else. I was looking at it. I was like, what? And maybe it reminded me of some element of it being human or whatever. But it was like, whoa! And that's kind of why you do it, right? You're part biologist and part kind of curious, kind of like how is this thing put together?
That's absolutely.
And you look at the legs, and you look at the length of you wonder how they can jump so fast.
One of the coolest things I ever did was I'd shot a feral dog, wild dog in Australia, a fox, also feral, and a feral cat, and took their skulls and boiled them out, and the teeth fall out when you boil them, put them all back in that. And I had on display at home, I had the fox, the dog, the fox, and the cat side by side. And it was almost like, and it's not, what's the word I'm looking for, evolution, but you could almost see evolution from a dog to a cat there, and the fox sort of halfway in between, and it's just fascinating. And I kind of, since through different means, have come to not have those skulls anymore, unfortunately, but it was always something that it was a really cool thing to show people. And just to be able to take the skull and actually turn it over and look at all the different bits and pieces, and then compare the next one to the next one, is really, really cool. Yeah, but talking about eerie screams, on that same trip, my father whacked a hare with the bow, and it just screamed like a baby. The noise that came out of it was like a screaming child, and I hadn't. It was a long time ago, and I hadn't seen or had shot a hare.
Piercing.
Oh, piercing, but just like a screaming infant. Yeah. And I was like, what? It was eerie. It was really eerie. And it was something like, I'd never want to hear that again.
No. It was something, I get it.
Our rabbits actually whistle. They sound like a whistling kettle when they're injured. like dead set, just like we say fox whistles, but the noise it mimics an injured rabbit, and it's a little button whistle you put in your mouth and blow to drag the foxes or cats or dogs in or whatever. But they dead set just sound like a whistling kettle. So that's a weird noise too. It's like an elk bugling too. It's like that big thing's making that noise, you know.
That pipe,
that high note they've got.
That's amazing.
So you mentioned you do a bit of rifle hunting. What sort of rifle do you have?
I've got a 30-06, and I've got an old Ruger, and I just purchased last year Tika, whatever that brand is.
Yep. Same caliber.
Same caliber, and it's funny
Beautiful.
because they had, I'm not a Luddite, but I'm definitely one that doesn't. I look at guns as tools.
Yep.
To each their own. There's a lot of guys that show up at the range and spend a lot of money on ammo, and they just love to shoot. They love that. Whatever, any aspect of it. I go through 3 or 4 bullets a year. I go to the range to make sure I'm still sighted in. I'll use a couple bullets, and I'll use hopefully 1 on an animal, maybe 2 if I have 2 tags. So 1 box of ammo is going to last me 4 or 5 years. But when I went in there last year for this rifle, I was basically, my Ruger is the heaviest thing on earth. And I'm usually trying to get into the backcountry, 4 or 5 miles back there just hiking. And so I wanted something lighter weight. And he sold me this gun. It was pretty cheap, and it's not sexy by any means, but it's super utilitarian. It works. It was maybe a full kilo lighter than my current setup.
Nice.
Which adds up.
Absolutely. When you're hunting in these
and I
mountains.
brought it to the range, and it was like night and day. It was lighter. I thought it'd have more kick. And it was the most beautiful shooting thing. I didn't flinch. It was like this, and I was within a few centimeters for 3 or 4 rounds. I was like, wow, I found my dream gun. This is amazing. But I was talking to him, and if you want to read about 6.5 Creedmoors and everything else, I basically asked him the question, and maybe he was just trying to sell me a gun too, because nobody wants a 30-06 anymore, but. Mike, am I looking at this wrong? Most of the shots I take are within 100 yards, 150 yards. I can still shoot it to 300 yards if I want, right? But I'm not that one shooting fox or wolf or coyotes from a distance, like that kind of thing. It's not. That's not what I do. And he's like, they've been making it for 100 years. You can buy ammo anywhere you want. It's still an amazing gun. He's like, if you don't believe the marketing, gun magazines need to sell guns. He's like, this is amazing. 30-06 is still incredibly relevant. And he's like, the ballistics on that thing have been proven up and down. So I shoot 180 grain bullet, copperhead, so there's less lead in the world, and that's my story. I don't. I got 3 shotguns, a 12, a 16 gauge that I love, and a 20. And bird hunting to me is still, like, for whatever reason, what gets me going. But in fact, Mike used to give me hell because we'd be out there elk hunting, and I'd flush a couple grouse, and I'd start running, and he's like, "God damn it, Roger, get back here! What are you doing? We're going for multiple meals. You're going for 1 dinner." I'm like, I can't help it. They're birds. So I love shotguns. It's just I don't know what it is, seeing them when you're younger, but there's something about going for upland birds with shotguns. And what do you have down there for birds?
Not a lot, believe it or not. You can't hunt native birds to an extent. There's a duck season further south. And
anything introduced though for like pheasant or anything like that? No.
Oh, look. Not that's on my radar.
Okay.
You can hunt in the Northern Territory. You can hunt magpie geese in a particular season.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of game birds here. They're it's grouse, ruffed grouse, blue grouse. They're going to weigh a couple pounds each. They're like big chickens, and they flush.
I saw a few grouse actually when I was up in Canada.
Yes.
A few weeks ago. Yeah.
Ptarmigan grouse.
Yep.
We have sage grouse. We have pheasants, obviously, which are great game birds.
Yep.
Kind of need a dog to flush them out. But
Yep.
there's something about it's just like shooting clays, right?
We have quails,
Yeah.
little things like this, and
Yeah.
quails, and quite often you would be walking through the long-standing grass in a paddock or whatever, and they'll just explode. And you just shit your pants. Especially we have snakes, and always in the back of your mind when you're walking in that country is snakes.
Right.
And so you're not on edge, but you're aware, and you sort of, but movements like that in the grass to an Australian sort of, well, I don't know, but to me at least they can make me pucker, and then you just swear at them as they fly away.
So that to me is our grouse season goes for a month and a half. It's just I think it's still going right now, ends pretty soon. And
Can you do that locally?
you can. You can. It's mostly on public lands, and they move to higher elevations throughout the season.
Yeah, okay.
But we went out 3 weeks ago, flushed 12 birds, 15 birds, and it's super fun. And my mate has a nice golden retriever.
Perfect. Who does his job? Retrieves.
Who does his job, and he brings back those birds, and so it was super fun.
Excellent.
The most beautiful tasting bird, and there's a lot of them out there. So yeah.
So you got the trip. The day you're talking about coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Anything else on the cards?
That's it.
Setting the calendar for March next year to buy your tags.
Yeah, and it's kind of I think depends on what's happened this year. Every year I always find a couple new hunting places.
Nice.
And I'm always kind of seeing what's in the freezer and seeing what my availability is. And this year, I got out for 3 days in a 5-day season for elk. It is what it is. That's why they call it hunting. But for deer, I'm going to give it a go and actually get out there for a few days. And it'd be great to do that. And then that's it. I kind of stopped waterfowl shooting. I've got a few friends that really want to get me out to their blind. Maybe it's just to drink whiskey. Maybe it's to see a sunrise and see some birds flying.
Still not a bad thing.
Yeah, and so I might get out there this winter. I don't know if I'll bring my gun or not and get a waterfowl stamp, a duck stamp as we call it, which is your federal tag for the year. I saw Winged Migration. It was a movie that
yes, I remember that one.
Follows ducks throughout the year. And
yep.
At one point, I was like, I probably don't need to shoot ducks anymore. I like the taste, not like upland birds.
Yep.
And they've had such a long journey, and then bang bang, see ya. And not that I'd eat it in a heartbeat. I just haven't gone duck hunting in probably 10 years or so. The last time I went duck hunting was in northeastern Colorado, and I was with a coworker, and shot a few teal, shot a few mallards, some pintail, some whatever was flying, and I remember I had a duck in my Filson coat, and it was one of these side front pockets where the duck was, and I had it in there, and there's 3 mallards 40 meters away that I saw, and I had this duck in here, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna crawl. It was on a dike, so I had to kind of stay low, and I was gonna jump shoot them, basically stand up and jump.
Yep,
They flush, and then you see if you can get them. And my buddy is way down there, and he's like, yeah, you go, you do your thing. He saw what I was doing. I flushed the mallards, didn't get a shot off. And I was like, where's my duck? Where's the duck out of it? It must have fallen out when I was crawling. So I'm crawling back, or I'm walking back, and I happened when I was crawling to go jump these mallards, I happened to crawl right over a badger hole.
Oh, no way.
And I come back, it's like 30 feet, and I come back, and there's a shitload of feathers all around this badger hole with my duck. And I suspect that, and this was in a matter of 45 seconds. I suspect that as I was crawling over it, the thing fell out. I don't think a badger would come right up to my chest and grab it. And came back, and and it's all feathers. And this badger took my duck. And I come back. It's a total non sequitur, but I come back to my buddy Rick, and Rick's like, "What do you got, big guy? What's going on here?" I'm like, "I just had a duck, but you won't believe this. I shot a duck, We were having bad
You got
shots. that
pickpocketed
day.
by a
I had it
badger.
and a freaking badger ate it. And it came and got it from me. And he's like, "You are so full of shit. You did not shoot that duck. You're a terrible shot." I'm like, no, really. I shot this thing. I had it in my pocket. I'll find you feathers. He's like,
I'll
"You're
find
so
you
full of
shells,
it."
yeah.
I'm like, no, really. A badger took it. I'm like, "Come here, check out this badger hole." He's like, "No, I don't want to see your badger hole." I'm like, "You're so full of it." Anyway, that was the last time I went duck hunting. But
You sure you don't hunt with me?
yeah.
Oh, shit, man! I tell you what.
Yeah, so the badger ate your duck.
Yeah, it's badger got my duck. Dead set. Oh, that's fantastic. So we've already covered. Like we'll wrap up in a bit, but because it's getting late, and we have places to be in the morning, don't we? So we've covered off on, I think, pretty much. I think it's always a good topic to talk about, and you covered off on it straight up what hunting is and what it means to you. Because I think part and parcel of having podcasts out on the airwaves is that when people tune into them and start to listen, they start to hear what value and what authenticity there is in the people that participate in these pastimes, and whatever the pastime is, the genuine, the passion and the connection with whatever it is that you're doing. And you definitely covered off on that, but moving on from that a little bit, I suppose, like the state of hunting as it is now for you here in Colorado, and what is it like? What's your perception of it? How it is? Like what's your how do you see the public reception of yourself as a hunter? As an outsider, I suppose lots of us from Australia look at hunting in the US and see a lot of very good things, and we see things that are structured in a way, like I said before, with the tag system, or a certain element of the acceptance of the culture of hunting that we don't have for a large part. How do you see it, and like current state, where it's going, what pressures are on it, and what you hope it'll be in the future?
I think I see data and numbers. I see that hunting is on the decline. I see that
Really?
new hunters aren't coming in. Then I also see that data that says hunters are coming in, and I can't really speak to the numbers
Because that's the opposite of a home.
Yeah, where numbers
Hunting
are up.
is going up. It's
Yeah.
become more and more popular. That's interesting.
And so I think I don't. I can't speak to the numbers. What I can say is that I think, as with anything, there's an evolution to the sport, to the pastime, and I think what I see right now, and it gives me hope, is that you have people that are entering in. You even have like hunting camps that teach people how to skin, and it's not back to the land. It's people that have always perhaps have had a connection to the land that now want to have a better connection to their food. Maybe because it's of big ag, maybe because it's they're looking for a more authentic experience. Maybe they're looking for that connection, something primal. And so what I see is a new round of hunters, a new generation of hunters that are coming up with that have never hunted, that didn't have parents teach them. And so they're starting from scratch, and they're choosing an ethic that's a little bit more maybe aligned with me in terms of fair chase, and it's not just maybe the older stereotype, uneducated hillbilly hunter who is just shooting things, and it's just a different type. And again, at the end of the day, hunters are killing animals. We're all in the same business, and to a certain degree, and I mean that by hunting in terms of for meat. I'm not talking about varmint hunters and others that are more into the
Pest
shooting.
control sort of thing. Yeah.
And so, but what it gives me hope is because I think a lot of people are saying, "Hey, I want to have a connection. I want to try to do things the right way. I want to do things in a humane way. I want to be lighter on the land, and I want to have a connection to my food." And I think by doing that, you have more people connected to nature. And I think when you love things, you tend to protect them and tend to be advocates for them.
Definitely.
And be ambassadors. So as a public lands manager, but also as a public lands lover in a sense, like, I think that's great to see. I do think that, Meat Eater and some of these other podcasts that are out there have helped provide a voice
Yep.
for a lot of hunters. They've helped, I think, maybe whether by default or whether just by social pressure or nudging folks to maybe do the right thing. They've also perhaps changed some behaviors and brought hunting to a more palatable, a more socially acceptable light than just the older image of, killing Bambi, whatever, or just the type of person that would hunt.
For sure.
Because as you know, it's all stripes, right? It's all folks that are doing this. So I love where it is. Colorado is a busy state. There are a ton of people here, and they're all here for the same reason. So it's not like we're better than them or whatever. But when you have that many people out in the woods, yeah, it can be sometimes a little bit much. And so sometimes you want to have this. It's that push pull where you want to advocate. You want to have people connect to nature. You want to have people out there hunting. And on the other hand, you're like, yeah, just not where I'm going, right? Because there is a proliferation,
Yep.
and there's a lot of there's some folks that are kind of adamant about, like, just stop the hunting podcast, stop bringing attention to all this stuff, because a lot of those great places are now pretty packed.
Yep.
And whether they're archers or they're riflemen or or muzzle loaders, whatever. A lot of people out there, or at least it's more visible. And so, yeah, there's just that. What I used to love, and I still do, about the hunters I've seen here is there's a level of camaraderie at the trailhead.
That's nice. Yeah.
The other day, I've noticed that some folks have said, like, you'll go to a trailhead and nobody will even say hi, and they're all just kind of doing their own thing, maybe being secretive. Maybe they have their new technology, their new GPS watches, and they've got whatever. They had drones up in the air. They knew where they were. But what I've always appreciated is the conversations I've had in the field with people that you meet. Whether you're elk hunting and you're bugling and you bring in a hunter in instead of a bull, or at camp or at the trailheads, hey,
Yep.
how are things?
Yep.
And you can still have some great conversations with people about their hunts, hear some stories, help them out, help haul things out.
Absolutely.
And so I still feel like that sense of community is there. Yeah, I think it's doing well. I think as we look at climate change, I think as we look at, like, other things that can affect population and herd sizes.
Yep.
It's not something I take for granted that we'll have healthy elk herds and deer herds. Things happen, brucellosis, whatever you want to, and other diseases that can happen. And so I think it's great that we have a lot of advocates out there. I think there's one last thing is I think there's some new voices. I belong to an organization called Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And it's truly about sportsmen that they belong to this organization for hunting. So that's preserving access. That's stopping billionaires from buying public land, for doing land exchanges and blocking people out of public lands.
Yep.
It's about fair chase, and it's not about the guns. NRA used to be a hunting organization back in the day, and it's now more of a Second Amendment gun rights organization. And we didn't have that many voices besides that. And so now with some other groups that are trying to say, hey, it's about hunting. It's about having some ethics, having some fun, and belonging to an organization that hopefully represents your views and interests.
Absolutely.
Within the larger sphere of hunting.
Yep.
So that's great too, because they are also, I think, giving a better public image of hunters, that we're conservationists, that we're not just all trigger happy
For sure.
folks.
Very important.
And that and it's not about the Second Amendment. It's about hunting and connecting with nature, and having memories for your kids and with your friends. So I like that aspect of it, that we have more voices. I think social media has helped with that.
Yeah.
I think even with things like YouTube, right? If you don't know how to do elk with the gutless method, there's ways you can learn. So
That's right.
I do think that, and that maybe it builds a virtual community. I don't know, but at least there's ways to make hunting a little bit more accessible. So you don't have to find somebody like I did
Yep.
to take you into the world that'll change your life forever.
No, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up real quick, but
Yeah.
it's really foreign conversation to me to have conversations with hunters at the trailhead that you don't know.
Yeah.
Because if I see a hunter in blocks that I hunt, it's just private land that I don't know, they're poaching.
Yeah, I get it.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And certain stuff's about to hit the fan. It's just, it's a
sometimes
really foreign concept. Yeah,
It is.
yeah,
And
yeah.
some are really friendly, and some are kind of like, they got their camp. And
That's awesome. It's really cool.
Sometimes, when there's a bunch of loaded rifles around there and tons of beers going around and people are being loud, it's not like something you just want to kind of walk into.
No.
But that being said, I feel like there's a lot of good people out there. I have to believe that.
Yep.
There's always going to be bad apples. There's always going to be folks that kind of make bad decisions.
Yep.
But I think it's alive and well. And I mean, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
That's cool. Like I had a very similar sort of experience, I suppose, the other week when I was down the road in Page at shooting at Horseshoe Valley there. Horseshoe Bend.
Shooting photos.
Shooting photos at sunset.
Arrows,
Shooting photos. And there were a whole bunch of other guys that stayed back well after sunset to get the Milky Way coming up and that, and all the mass flocks of tourists had disappeared. There's about a dozen of us standing there, and of course conversation struck up because we're all sharing the same passion. But that sort of thing with hunting at home only happens down the range, not at the trailhead. It's just really interesting. Let's wrap it up. It's getting late. Mate, thanks so much for taking the time out.
Thanks, Luke.
Because I know you're very busy.
Yeah.
And we've had a big day and a big feed of Mexican before this.
Can't think about meat in the freezer right now. I got a lot of meat in the belly.
Protein coma. But thanks so much for having us and welcoming us into your home for the last, not continuous, but 5 nights.
It's good to have you.
We have had such a great time.
And hopefully I can keep listening to this podcast and get some inspiration. So someday we come around the world to see you. We can.
There's no seasons down home, so whenever you rock up, we can go. We can go. That's the thing. So it's been really cool to be able to have you on the podcast and just to have this conversation not full circle yet because we haven't been hunting, but we'll close that gap at some point and share the conversations that we started from 12, 13 years ago. It's really cool. Perfect. Well, there you have it, team. That next episode in the bank. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. I know it really was an awesome time having a yarn with Rog and just discussing the finer points of what it is that, makes him a hunter, but also those common bonds. We just keep hearing these same themes over and over again in hunters, in all the podcasts that we listen to and all the interviews that we hear. What drives us, what makes us passionate about what it is that we do and what it is that keeps getting us back out into the bush, into the wild, into the paddock, to reconnect and ground ourselves back within the passion of hunting and the wilderness and the outdoors. I hope to bring you another podcast very soon during my travels. I've now moved on from Colorado and I'm on the second last night of 9 in New York City, staying with a very good friend of mine again, and also a very passionate hunter and outdoorsman. So tune in soon, episode 6 sure to be another special episode from my perspective, and I hope you have enjoyed listening today. And don't forget, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and please give us a share. And by all means, get in contact with any feedback, any comments and questions you might have. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, team. Catch you again soon.